Ryan.
Hi, Savanah.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about Raya and the Last Dragon. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us to talk about this wonderful topic today. If you stay tuned to the end of the episode, we will be talking about our Pokemon card giveaway and everything that you need to do to enter while supplies last. Thank you.
Trust me, you're going to want to stay till the end. She's got some pretty great Pokemon cards she could be sending you. And before we jump into this, we just want to give a quick thank you to our sponsors. We do have some anonymous sponsors who have decided to help us out with the podcast, and we're just really appreciative of them and everything that they're doing to help us get this project going. And if you or anybody you know might be interested in also sponsoring our podcast, feel free to reach out to us with our email, which is in our description below. All right, and so in today's episode, we're going to be discussing issues of Asian representation in media broadly, amongst other things that we will be talking about. But I think it's important before we get into that discussion to just generally acknowledge some of the struggles that are facing the Asian American community here in the United States right now. Over the course of 2020, hate crimes and violent attacks have been happening at an increasing rate against our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities here in the U.S., largely due to racist and xenophobic ideas about the pandemic. So that I think is just important to make sure that everybody is aware of that. And we will be touching a little bit more on that later in the podcast as well. But just so everybody knows that we are going to be linking a really great organization in our description that is specifically dealing with this issue. It's called Stop AAPI Hate, which is Stop Asian American and Pacific Islander Hate. And they specifically are dealing with recording these types of attacks that are happening and donating and helping people who are facing these problems. So we really want to encourage everybody, if this is something that you care about and are passionate about, to check out this organization and maybe consider leaving them a donation.
Thank you for that, Savanah. But back to our topic, Raya and the Last Dragon. I wanted to give some quick background info for those of you who may not know that this movie existed, which I may believe that Disney didn't want you to know that this movie existed. It is notably directed by Carlos Lopez Estrada, a Latino director, and also Don Hall, who's a white director. Notably, though, it is co-written by two Southeast Asian descent folks, Ki Nguyen and Adele Lim. So it does have some great representation in the production cast. Raya is played by Kelly Marie Tran, who is notable in her role in Star Wars as Rose. Forgive me, can't remember her last name.
I think it's Tico.
Oh, Rose Tico, thank you. And the voice of Sisu is played by Awkwafina. The cast features a predominantly Asian cast, not so much Southeast Asian, which a lot of the lore is based off of, but overall kind of a wonderful diverse cast. And of course, we can't have a Disney film apparently now without Alan Tudyk, with the voice of that lovable little animal, Tuk Tuk. Raya released the same day as the WandaVision season finale, which I thought really undercut any kind of demographic that would watch Raya. That felt a little bit strange, and this movie was marketed pretty weird as well. Like I said, I didn't really know that this movie existed. I knew it was kind of coming in general, but from what I could tell, they did not want people to see this movie. I don't know why. And they locked it behind the $30 Disney Premier Access paywall, the same one that Mulan got. And they had just given us Soul as well, Soul for free. Coincidental callback to our last week's episode, Cassie Steele was originally set to play Raya, but apparently she left the cast for differences in the portrayal of Raya, which I want to know more about that. I'm very curious about what that could have been.
I actually saw that she was let go. Like, she didn't choose to leave. Like, really? my understanding was that they had, like, a lot of major changes that they, like, made to the script, and they felt like she was no longer a good fit for the role. And so they recast her, which I can't imagine. That seems really harsh.
That does seem really harsh.
Like, that would have been such a big break for her. When I read that, I was kind of sad.
I don't know. Cassie Steele's voice is a little bit, whiny for me, not in like a bad way. I feel like Kelly Marie Tran's voice is very like clear, And it was very pleasant to listen to, and I don't know if Cassie would have done as good of a job, in my opinion.
So since we've only really talked about Disney like a little bit here and there, I think it'd be great if we could just like share our general feelings about Disney or Disney movies. If we like them, do we hate them? Are we Disney bound people? Do we have annual passes? What's the deal with our feelings on Disney? So for me personally, I feel like I have always liked Disney. As a kid, I loved Disney movies. They were probably my favorite movies when I was a kid. Ryan and I have been to some of the parks together quite a few times. I guess a few times, maybe not quite a few times. And I think you and I have always enjoyed watching Disney movies together, especially when we were younger. I wouldn't say that I'm like a major Disney fan now. My Disney feelings have definitely waned as I've gotten older, but I still do enjoy seeing the movies. I used to work with kids at a Boys and Girls Club, and I always used to really love like getting to go to the movies with them during like their summer camp and stuff, and getting to see all the new ones. And I feel like I don't really have as many people in my life that want to go see the new Disney movies with me in theaters when we used to go to the movie theaters. So I feel like I've been kind of missing out on that lately. But generally, like Disney. What are your feelings on Disney, Ryan?
Yeah, pretty much like identical. I'm probably not as jaded as you are about Disney. I love animation and I love kids media, and I'm very passionate about how it affects kids and affects me, and I don't see myself really as any kind of lower being than a child. In fact, I think I was much more creative in my youth, and I often wish I could think as much as I did back then. And I think that kids' movies are a great way to kind of tap into that. And I always want to see what's next. I always want to see the next big children's movie to come out, the next thing that's thought-provoking, the next animation style. So I'm definitely a connoisseur of the children media, everything.
I would just like to say I'm not jaded towards Disney. I think I just don't have as strong of feelings of it as I used to.
Came off as jaded.
Well, I just mean, okay, so like literally I remember in high school being like trying to seriously consider if I could be a Disney princess at a park. Mm. And at a certain point I was like, okay, maybe that's not the life for me. And I think it just, in the course of that, I went from there to just having like a medium amount of appreciation, I guess you could say.
I think that's fair. Savannah, something that's very important to me, I love fantasy, and I want to know what our favorite dragons are to get those biases out of the way. I did have kind of mixed feelings about this design for Shisu, the dragon in Raya and the Last Dragon. The Last Dragon, you know. So I did have some mixed feelings, but I wanted to know your favorite dragon.
I think my favorite dragon is Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon, but there are several other dragons I would like. I think my second contenders would be the dragons from Avatar: The Last Airbender when they do the dragon dance.
Oh yeah, those are beautiful dragons.
Who are your favorite dragons, or is your favorite dragon?
Well, I got a picture right here. I actually have a picture of all three of them. So there's these three wonderful dragons in Breath of the Wild. Farosh, Dinral, and Nadra. And they're all in different parts of Breath of the Wild. And when you find them in there, they're just so magical, so breathtaking. Like a different music plays over, and you're just transported. They're so beautiful. They're so beautiful. They're my favorite right now. But of course, I also love Toothless, and I love dragon-type Pokemon. But yeah.
Ooh, hang on. I just remembered Dragon Tales. Those ones might be my favorite dragons, because I was obsessed with that show when I was a kid.
Dragon Tales, also primo.
My question to you, since this is a Disney princess movie, who is your favorite Disney princess?
It used to be Ariel, then it was Rapunzel for a little while, and now it's probably Moana, just because I love the music of Moana, and I think she has the favorite, like my favorite I Want song out of any princess. I mean, Part of Your World is still second place in my heart, though. After, I can only think about it starts, I've been staring at the... You know that one? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that lovely serenade, Ryan.
Who's yours?
I think historically my favorite princess has always been Ariel. Just forever, and she probably will be my favorite princess for forever. But the second closest are probably Mulan. I really wanted to like be Mulan when I was a kid. I also really love Jasmine, and I don't know if she counts, but I'm gonna throw out Jane from Tarzan. Also, because to me, she's always been a princess. Whether or not she's been recognized by the larger community or not, I don't know.
You mean by the Disney canon, not by the larger community. For a little while, I felt pressured for Jasmine to be my favorite princess just because she was, like, kind of brown and, like, different. And so I wanted to have a different answer. But I don't think that Jasmine's ever really been my favorite princess. I just wanted to, like, air that laundry really quick. But we can kind of move on to general thoughts about Raya and move off from Disney in general. Overall, I give it, like, a solid 7 out of 10. I really liked it. The animation was very impressive. It wasn't as mature as I wanted it to be. There were a lot of jokes that fell flat for me, and we won't be getting into any spoilers just yet, so just a pre-warning. But there were a lot of things, like in the very opening scene, the phrase dragon nerd is used, and like the language is just really modern for me for the world. I think there's a sort of escapism that you get from just like a different style of language, and this was very like English to me.
I feel like I kind of had different thoughts on the language. I felt like there was some moments where I felt like they were using some like really high level vocabulary words that I wasn't even sure that necessarily some adults would understand, and I was kind of surprised by that. Like specifically, I remember when they were talking about like the Druun and it being like afraid of water, like the dad was like, it's repelled by water, and I was like, repelled is kind of a big word for kids. Like I don't feel like kids would know what something means to be repelled by water. And I feel like there's like a few other instances that I can't think of off the top of my head where I was kind of like, wow, that kind of seems advanced for children maybe, but maybe those things were just thrown in for the adults. But generally overall, I think that I enjoyed it quite a bit. I really love Awkwafina in general, so I really liked her presence in this movie. And yeah, also with
I hated it. Awkwafina was my least favorite part of this movie.
What?
Really?
Okay, I don't understand that.
Well, Awkwafina, I think is just too much. At least for this movie. She's just a little too much. I think that dragons are, in my mind, supposed to be a little bit more regal. She was like really down to earth, really cool, and it was like not ironic. I feel like this movie had a lot of humor that didn't land well for me because it was so genuine and presented not with a layer of irony. Unlike Shrek, right? Or a lot of DreamWorks films, Megamind, where they know they're making like some stupid jokes and they know that they're really playing into kind of that dumb humor. But this one they were doing that and it all felt like they were trying to be cool. Like, we're talking to the kids. I slaughter in the water. He's stoned. They used he's stoned 3 times. 3 times. And kids definitely know what stoned means, okay? They definitely do. Also, Princess Undercut was used.
You didn't like that?
I did not like that. I thought it was stupid.
I don't know. I disagree. I liked that Awkwafina's interpretation of Zizou was like normal. Like I thought that was interesting, that it was kind of like a twist on your traditional like dragon that's like all knowing and wise or something like that, and it wasn't quite just like either like a ripoff of Mushu from Mulan. Like she wasn't just like sassy. Like to me she just felt very endearing. So
no, now that you say that, complete ripoff of Mushu from Mulan. Nope. We can move on though. Awkwafina also has her own like dirty laundry to air with her co-opting the use of black language and kind of the black sounding way of speaking. The awful portmanteau being blaccent is specifically prominent in her role in Crazy Rich Asians. So you guys can look into that on your own terms. So I just have my own little thing with Awkwafina, and I used to really like her. She was a YouTuber first, and she's kind of just declined for me over time. So
I feel like I could see that, what you're saying with the way that she's speaking. I have never seen that presented to me before. But I think I've always kind of assumed, like, at least I've watched like part of Nora from Queens, her show on Comedy Central, and I kind of always associated like her way of speaking more so being from like New York versus trying to like code switch in some way or like adopting a like black way of speaking, but I could see what you're saying with that. But back to the animation style, I also really appreciate the animation. Just like with Canvas, like how we were talking about like being really impressed, this was like 3 steps forward almost, I feel like, from Canvas with some of the animation techniques. Like specifically, I remember like there was a part in the beginning where they were having like soup and there was a bowl that looked like it was like made out of like shiny opal or something, and it was like so reflective and beautiful looking. And then there was also a scene where they were like jumping in water, and I swear to me it looked almost just like video footage of water. It was pretty incredible.
It was. And just in case you haven't seen Raya and the Last Dragon and you kind of want a general synopsis, it's your general MacGuffin quest where the main character, Raya, teams up with the Last Dragon, and they go on a quest to get all these different parts, put them all together to get rid of the big bad. That's kind of the general whole movie.
All right, so with all of that out of the way, now we're going to go ahead and kind of jump into some of our like meatier topics that we want to discuss with Raya and the Last Dragon.
So just so we're clear, now that we have gone through our general thoughts and a little bit of the synopsis, we are entering spoiler territory. So if you have not seen it and want to see it without any spoilers, please click off, watch it, come join us, come back. Thank you.
All right, so the first thing that I really noticed with this movie is that it took the approach of, rather than focusing on like a single real culture, in this case they probably would have chosen like a single real Asian culture to base the story on, they took the approach of like mixing together a bunch of different cultures to kind of create their own culture. And I kind of have mixed feelings on when movies choose to do this. Some other examples of movies that will kind of combine things together are things like Moana or Aladdin or something maybe like the Black Panther or even Avatar, The Last Airbender. And I think that there's kind of pros and cons to this approach. I read a really interesting article about this. I was specifically talking about like the mixing of Asian cultures within Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I'll link that down below. But I think it's applicable to maybe some parts of Raya too, or at least to just view maybe what they could have done or didn't do. So this author specifically is saying that in Avatar: The Last Airbender, they felt like it was effective for them to be combining different Asian cultures together because they were not basing it solely on like stereotypes of Asian culture. In Avatar, they made more of a attempt to base things off of like various historical events that happened in different parts, different Asian countries. And to that, it seemed like the author felt like it was more like real, or it just felt more authentic in how it was trying to portray a story based off of these cultures, but not really being about the cultures, which I thought was interesting. And I can't say, it doesn't really seem like that necessarily was the case with Raya, in my opinion. I watched the movie, like on Disney Plus, they have like some extra things that you can watch, and they had like a 3-minute short where they were showing the production team like traveling to all these different Southeast Asian countries and doing some research. It was kind of unclear what the research really was, but they showed them going there. They all claimed it was like a transformative experience being there, but I kind of felt more so along the lines that Raya was relying more upon like just general stereotypes of Asian culture and trying to blend those things together, or at least maybe not even necessarily stereotypes, but more just so things that are easily identifiable by Western audiences as being Asian, and like blending those things together.
Yeah, I actually didn't immediately get that it was a blend. I really did think it was based on a specific myth in South Asian culture, and I learned in my little doodly-doo research that the only thing that really kind of came handpicked from like a specific culture was Sishu herself, who is prolific in a lot of different myths. She's found in like Buddhism and Jainism and just kind of across the board. So I really did think that this myth or legend was pulled specifically from something. And I wasn't sure what, but I watched the film, and I really did think that. But then, of course, right after I watched the movie, I didn't go into it already have researched. I came out of it researching, and I learned the same thing as you. And I feel like a little bit more mixed feelings. Like when I read fantasy novels, I think a lot of the time they are Western fantasy novels, and it is rare to see those Eastern-inspired fantasy stories. And when I read a Western fantasy novel, they are a lot of like really graphic, like this is inspired by Ireland or England or Wales or what have you, and they take a lot of the easily identifiable myths. So they're kind of doing the same thing here, but maybe it is more harmful in that they are taking the more easily recognizable, identifiable myths when we don't have Southeastern representation in our everyday lives. We don't see it every single day like we do Western stuff. So I kind of have mixed feelings on that. I do like the general approach of being inspired by multiple places and kind of creating your own amalgamation of something. Like this was someone's project. There are 2 writers on this who are responsible, who do come from Southeastern heritage. So I don't think we can overlook that.
I did think it was interesting. In this same article that I mentioned before, they do talk about how this is not unusual in Western fantasy stories, something akin to like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. Like it's a lot of times like a blending of Western cultures, just like you said. And I kind of wondered if my own uncomfortability with seeing like these Asian cultures blended together, I wasn't sure if it was coming from a place of just feeling like I like when they show a single culture, because I feel like then I can really like learn about that culture and develop an appreciation for some of the things that they might do or their practices. But the other thing that I wasn't sure of is if just I'm so used to seeing like a blending of Western cultures that it doesn't even necessarily register in my mind always that they're doing that. And is that just like some kind of bias that I have of like, well, why can't they do that with Asian cultures also? Or why couldn't they do that with Latin American cultures? Like, why is it weird for me to see that versus in a Western setting, if that makes sense? So I wasn't sure if that was just like some kind of bias that I had. But I don't know. I think it is true. Like we do see that oftentimes a blending of things together does result in like pretty severe stereotyping. Not so much with Raya. I don't think it was like that obscene, anything that happened in that. But I mean, like a worst case scenario could be something like Aladdin, Disney's Aladdin, but also like previous tellings of Aladdin prior to the Disney animated movie, where it was blending together, because it's not even really based on a real story. Some people think that it's from 1001 Arabian Nights, but it's not. Somebody just kind of made it up and pretended like it was a part of it. But it was just like an amalgamation of Arab cultures and Chinese cultures that just resulted in like really horrific stereotyping and portrayals of those cultures. So that's like worst case scenario of what could happen with it. I think that some movies that have focused on a single culture could be something like Coco or Mulan, or something like Emperor's New Groove. Those movies focus on a single culture, but those ones run the risk of having problems still. I think anytime that people who are outside of that culture are the ones who are like mostly involved with the production of the movie, there is definitely issues that can arise with that. Like for instance, Coco I think was like really heralded by a lot of people of being like a good example of how you could do like lots of research, travel to communities to try to make like a movie that seems and feels authentic. And a lot of people, I think probably including us, our family, maybe. One time I stumbled upon your brother, Ryan, watching Coco alone in the dark and having a moment with that movie. But a lot of Mexican-American people have really identified with that movie. However, with all of the research and things that they did, there's still been like controversies of them specifically basing characters like Mama Coco on a real person who lives in Mexico, and that family like not receiving like any royalties or anything like that from the movie. So movies that focus, or stories that focus on single cultures, are not like out of the woods either with this. But I think generally I like more when it's a single culture. I kind of also wonder sometimes if they blend cultures together as like kind of like a get out of jail free card, so that way if they mess something up, they can't be like, oh, well, you just didn't do your research enough on Vietnamese culture. Well, they can be like, oh, well, it's not really Vietnam and it's fantasy, so we can just say whatever we want. I don't know. Do you ever feel that way? That that's why they do that?
Maybe it's because I am around a lot of people who are white and do struggle to come up with their own fantasy worlds, and they don't want to base it off of Western mythology, and they want to draw more from Eastern mythology, and they really try to be conscious about it, and they really think about hard, and I can see the work that they're putting into it, and my heart goes out to them. It really does. Like, I can understand not wanting to always draw from Western mythology because it's just been so overdone at this point, and wanting to do an amalgamation of everything and just a blend of your own fantasy world. And I genuinely believe that's okay. It doesn't bother me. And I think that if you are trying to do a specific idealization, like fantasy representation of a specific culture, whether it be Mulan with Chinese culture or Peruvian with Emperor's New Groove, you probably really should be of that ancestry. And you, I think that's kind of the end line there, where if you're building a fantasy world of your heritage in that vein of your own personal knowledge. So I personally don't feel that way. I don't know if you've ever tried to create a fantasy world of your own, but it's hard. It's very hard. So I think it's okay. And I don't think it is a get out of jail free pass, because like you said with Aladdin, you can have a lot of pitfalls and you can end up hyper stereotyping a lot of people. So I think they're both challenging in their own ways.
I do have a question for you. Like, would you ever write like a story or design a game that is based around like maybe a main character that is of a different culture than you are?
I mean, I would, and I have. So yes.
Okay. How did you feel about it?
I feel like, for one, more research needed to be done. And for two, I don't think I would choose anything that I would feel uncomfortable with. One example, I helped in college, a friend we did kind of a brain project together, and we had two protagonists, one be of Mexican-American descent and another one be of Korean descent. And neither of us were Korean, and we really were struggling with that, and we still kind of are struggling with whether that should be portrayed, but it's hard. It's hard when you want to have representation, or you can fall into the pitfall of John Green, where in his earlier books he specifically did not say what any of the races were. And back in the day, that kind of seemed like, that's a good way to get around it. You can really imprint yourself on anyone who you wanted to imprint yourself upon. But then it's like a slap in the face years later when you want specific representation. Or with Hermione Granger, where she's never specifically coded anyway. But now JK is like, oh, she's always been black. Like, I've always kind of thought of her that way, when really that's not really been the case.
I think, like, in my own experience, like, I did a photo shoot with two of my friends who were Chinese, and they, like, specifically came to me about wanting to do kind of like, it was like their idea for a project, basically, about how they wanted to create like a photo series that was exploring what it meant to them to be Chinese and from different countries and in America now. And I feel like for me, I felt comfortable with that project because like they were the ones coming to me with the idea, and I was kind of more so like taking a back seat, I guess, and trying to help them like achieve what they wanted to achieve. And because otherwise I feel like I would feel kind of conflicted. Like, I already kind of feel that way when I have thought about doing other projects that might be dealing with issues. Like, for instance, like I've considered making artwork that would touch on an issue of like Black Lives Matter, but then I'm like, I don't necessarily feel like it's my place, or at least it would just involve like a lot of thought about how I would want to go about that in an ethical and effective way. I do think it's interesting that the director of this movie is Mexican American. He also directed Blind Spotting, which I haven't seen. I don't know if you've seen that movie, Ryan. But Blind Spotting is a movie about police brutality and how it affects the Black community. So it's kind of interesting to me that he is choosing to make movies that are about other cultures than his own and what those implications are for him. I always kind of feel like I would just always rather see people of those cultures making the movies because, one, you know, a person can never have like the true lived experience of another person or another culture. But two, just because privilege is still an issue, and I don't think privilege, like for this particular director, may not be the same as it is for like somebody like me, who, while I'm Mexican American, I'm also white. So like for me, it would probably be systemically easier for me to make a movie about Asian cultures than it would be for an Asian person to make a movie about Asian cultures. So I think the more that we can kind of like step back to allow people to make the things that they want to make that are directly tied to them is always good. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we feel about pretty much a whole male production cast writing a female story?
Not a fan. I mean, I feel like you see things all the time that are like random little like lines out of a book that's like about a woman that just is something like completely ridiculous, and then you see it was like written by a man, and it's like, well, of course he doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. Honestly, I did not think about that when I was watching this movie though, because I wasn't aware of that. How do you feel about it?
I mean, clearly I want to see more women in the director's chair. Both the main co-directors and the co-writers, all male, and they specifically say that they are producing a women's story and that everything that they're pulling from is from women that they know in their real lives, which all fair and dandy, but I'm just not really clear why they couldn't get someone on their team that is a woman and help them out and be a co-director as well, at the very least. So there is that. I mean, it's not something that I noticed either when watching it. I didn't notice any weird women things that were amiss in my book, but that's just a whole different problem. I just kind of wanted to point that out, but we can move on.
Another thing that I did think was interesting was just like the timing of this movie coming out, like you were saying, of it kind of feeling like it was overlooked, I guess, by like other things and not like pushed by Disney. But something that I did think was interesting was just like the kind of aligning, which was probably coincidental, of this movie coming out now. And like I mentioned before, like the rising of violence that has been facing the Asian American community here in the United States. That was probably just completely coincidental. But like right now in the United States, over the past year in 2020, within 16 cities, hate crimes against Asian American people have risen by 150%. Recently, we've been hearing more and more cases of elders in these communities specifically facing really horrible attacks on them. And a lot of this has been fueled by just really awful racist things that our former president was saying about the pandemic. So I think it's interesting just to also note that this movie came out like within that context. And I don't know, maybe I feel like Disney maybe missed a moment of being able to like really blast that. Like for instance, like this was also probably coincidental, but I've seen people talk about Coco and being like, Coco came out at a time when Mexican American people or Latinx people in general in the United States were starting to feel like maybe kind of down about all of the racist things that our president was saying at the time about Mexicans or about Latinx people, and how it kind of was like a rallying movie for that culture. And I think that Raya could have also been that, but they chose not to do that.
Yeah, I think unlike Coco, who centers around ancestry and respecting your heritage and specifically your elders until the end and beyond, Raya did not do that. She had her father, but that was it. That's as far as like the lineage, as far as I'm aware, went back. And they do say in the beginning that, you know, this whole plague The Druun started 500 years ago, and so they have an expansive history, apparently. But when watching it, I didn't feel that. It did not feel like a movie about culture and heritage to me. I think Moana is another excellent prime example of feeling like it's about yourself and your family and being able to hold on to your identity while still respecting your past. But this for me was just kind of like a flat story that did not go too much deeper.
Something else also along these lines that I thought was unfortunate. Kelly Marie Tran, who plays Raya, she specifically has faced quite a bit of trolling from racists on the internet, not in regards to this movie, but in regards to Star Wars, with just first of all, her appearances in Star Wars are not very big. In the grand scheme of the movies, I read that she literally was only on screen for less than 3 minutes, and yet because people did not like, or at least some people did not like the last Star Wars movies that came out in the franchise, they decided to kind of attack her and blame her for some reason.
It's more than that, Savannah. It's more than that, okay? It's more than that. It's more than that. Yes, that is a large part of it. I think that racism plays a huge, huge part. But it was also the fact that they set her up with Finn in her appearance, and Finn and Poe were supposed to be the queer coming of Star Wars, and she kind of feel like she took that away. She ripped that up, and I think that was the writer's fault. And I think if she had been put in there as a different character and given a different role, it would have been fine. Probably still some racist, and the movies are bad, so there's also that. But also she did that. She did that.
Well, okay. I would just like to say, from what I read of the situation, I did not see this situation unfold out on the internet. But to me, it seemed like it was more so the people who were bullying her were the people who were I know everything about Star Wars because I was alive in the 70s and I have the full knowledge, and this just does not make any sense why she would be here. And I don't think they cared anything about any type of gay romance that could have been happening.
Two different communities, right? One full of hate and vitriol, the other one also full of hate and vitriol, but different thought processes.
Yeah, because the articles that I read about this were also comparing it to Daisy Ridley and John Boyega also getting backlash when The Force Awakens first came out, and just people being upset about a black character and a female Jedi.
I don't know about you, Savannah, but one of the first things that struck out to me, and I know this is my own brain and my own biases and what I'm looking for, and I'm always looking for representation, is kind of the queer coding, probably more like queer baiting, of Raya and Namaari, especially when we first get their introduction together. They're both the dragon nerd types, and they set up the whole betrayal, and it's such a haters to lovers setup that I felt, but at the same time I knew it couldn't be because, probably couldn't be because Disney. And Namaari also didn't get a lot of development as well, so I probably knew she wouldn't be super integral to Raya's emotional development, besides her whole trust arc. But I don't know if you got that right out the gate.
I did. I definitely also felt that.
At first I was trying to push it out of my brain, because they're children, right? You're I can't do this. They're children. I shouldn't think about it. But then you get the whole scene where Raya is stealing her first little gem piece, and Namaari shows up, and she's all identifying herself as a cat lady, and she still has her awesome undercut. She's buff as all get out, and they have such chemistry between them, and everyone knows that, at least I feel like everyone knows that cat lady is coded as your modern day lesbian. And same with the look about her as well, how she was dressed, the color of her hair, just kind of everything read queer to me. And I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but I do feel like they had an opportunity, and Kelly Marie Tran has specifically stated that she felt some tension between Damari and Raya, so she was kind of portraying it that way. But at the same time, Kelly Marie Tran herself, as far as I know, isn't queer. And no one else has come out and said anything. But also, was Kelly Marie Tran put up to this? I don't know. What do you think?
I feel like whenever a celebrity does that about like a movie or something, I just never understand why. And if they're not like a writer, I feel like whatever it is they say can't be like taken as canon necessarily either. So I always kind of feel like when somebody does that, it's just like to try to boost whatever it is. Like she was maybe trying to boost Raya and its audience maybe. It always just feels like it's playing to that, especially if it's somebody who is not queer or of that community. But I also felt that way, like especially as far as like, especially when they were kids, being like, okay, this is not the focus right now. And I think just in general, it feels like Disney movies or Disney princess movies are starting to like move away from like romance elements in general. I feel like the last one that I remember seeing with a romance was Frozen. Has there been any other ones that have any kind of romance in them since Frozen?
I mean, Frozen was the second most recent like Disney movie to come out. But no, you're right. I mean, Moana doesn't have it. Tangled did. If we're thinking about princess movie canon, it doesn't go that far back. And then it pretty much all has romance. But Elsa doesn't have romance, unless you count Frozen 2, where she totally has chemistry with that North Aldrin lady that she's building fire with. But other than that, no.
So yeah, I feel like if Disney wanted to be groundbreaking, they definitely could have had a moment with this movie, but they did not, which is not surprising. And I kind of wonder if it's maybe like the end almost of having romance in movies like this, just in general, which, I have kind of mixed feelings on. I feel like on the one hand, I feel like it's good not to like pressure kids into thinking like that romance is that important. I mean, obviously it's a good part of life, but it's not like the end all be all like it is in something like The Little Mermaid. But I don't know. I feel like I do kind of enjoy that element in Disney movies, but I don't know if that's just like my own issue. I guess of being socialized to want that in my Disney movies or Disney princess movies. I mean, if it was like a queer romance, I would be like 100% down for that. That would be very exciting to see in a Disney movie.
They have a lot of opportunity to introduce a queer lady into the canon of Disney princesses. Raya isn't even included yet. She is suspected to be included into the canon, but she has not taken up that elusive throne. But Elsa, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Frozen 3. And even Raya, I doubt will be a sequel. I really do. I don't anticipate this movie doing very well, just because of the way they've set it up. But if it does, it's not yet a missed opportunity. But from what I feel right now, I almost wish that the queer tension hadn't been there at all. It just a little bit feels like a slap in the face.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it kind of did do that. As an aside, one time, the last time I was at Disneyland, which was in like, I don't even know, 2017 maybe, we had an Uber driver who dropped us off at the park, and she was telling us about how she supposedly worked for Disney in some capacity, and that she had some inside knowledge that eventually there was going to be a trans main character in a Disney movie. But I kind of feel like that was a lie. I kind of feel like this lady was making things up to me in the Uber. All right, so we're going to take a quick break because we're going to play a little guessing game with Ryan here. So for this game, Ryan, I'm going to present to you a birth chart meaning a astrology birth chart with a sun sign, a moon sign, and a rising sign. And I will explain kind of what the difference is between those. And then I will give you 3 celebrities, and I want you to guess which celebrity you think goes with this birth chart. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So just for background, in case you don't know or our listeners may not know, your sun sign is supposed to represent who you are and what your motivations are in life. Your sun sign is like the main one that most people know about themselves. Your moon sign represents kind of your inner feelings and the things that are on like a deep personal level that you keep to yourself. And lastly, your rising or ascendant sign is supposed to be how you present yourself to the world. So with each of these, I'll also tell you what like element the sign is in case that helps you to guess. So this person's sun sign is Pisces, and Pisces is a water sign. Their moon sign is Aries, and Aries is a fire sign. And their rising sign is also Aries, which again is a fire sign. So Ryan, do you think that this birth chart applies to A, Rihanna, B, Elizabeth Warren, or C, Drake?
I'm going to go with A.
Ding, ding, ding. You are correct. It is A, Rihanna. Good job, Ryan.
Yeah, Rihanna just feels like pretty like cool on the surface, but she, you know, she has like bitch better bring the money, you know, like definitely a lot of Aries in her. But I wouldn't see Rihanna and think Aries, but you know.
Yeah. And back to our regularly scheduled programming. All right, so the next thing that I would like to talk about, Ryan, is how it felt to specifically watch this movie in the context of the pandemic. Specifically because like they do reference the Druun being kind of like a plague that is facing the community. And I don't really know about you, Ryan, but I always kind of feel weird now watching things that reference like a plague or a disease or something that's like that kind of nature. It just feels kind of weird, especially if it's like old, then it just feels like really out of touch. But if it's like current, it just seems like, why would they choose that language? What do you think? How do you feel when you encounter that?
I honestly didn't really pick up on that when I was watching Raya, but I have started reading the Darkest Minds trilogy, which is kind of that like Divergent Hunger Games era that everyone was reading. I'm one of those dystopians, and they do have a plague in it, and it just feels incredibly outdated. I mean, they stopped paying the police because they can't afford to, and I know that they would just only pay the police, you know? Like, that's how I know that the government would operate if a plague and they needed to brutalize children and lock them away because they're dangerous. Anyways, with this one, I really did not think about that at all. It did not register in my brain that this was a fantasy plague and I'm living through a pandemic right now. Nope, didn't cross my brain. Not once.
So to me, it felt very, very timely. And I am sure, well, maybe I'm not sure, that I was reading too much into it. But, so the movie was first announced in 2018. But it seems as though some major changes occurred. These major changes, like, nobody has really outright said what they were, but I know like the title of the movie changed, and it seems like they at some point went in like a very different direction with their character development.
Yeah, it was the Empire of the Dragons first, which we could kind of imagine what that could have been like.
Then it seems like in 2019 and 2020, lots of things changed with it, and they were still working on the movie in 2020. Also in this like behind the scenes stuff that they have on Disney Plus, they show the animators and the voice actors like working from home on the movie, which is kind of interesting. But so I say all of that to say I wonder if some of the changes that they made, they changed to like fit within the context of the pandemic. But the main thing that I really latched onto and was thinking about in the context of the pandemic was like the whole story of like trust and trying to like share things with people. To me, that was like kind of like the main moral of the story, or at least the one that they talked about the most, was how you have to trust people, and that you should share that? Essentially.
You
yeah,
picked up
yeah,
that?
I got that.
You really? Whoa!
You would think after getting a master's degree that still might be a little difficult for me.
Yeah, and after they like say trust like 18 times, and after like they have 3 separate discussions after, you know, going through the different parts of the MacGuffin quest, and she's all like, you gotta trust people, man. And Raya's like, but I can't. You got that?
Anyways, so I just thought it was interesting to think about trust in the context of the pandemic. And I don't know about you, Ryan, but I don't feel like I can trust anybody anymore after this whole situation of the past, like almost a year and a half now. I don't think I really felt like I could trust people before that, but now I especially feel like I can't trust people in a lot of different ways. Like in the beginning, like here in the United States, like states themselves didn't trust other states to not be hoarding like PPE, just kind of like how in Raya people were hoarding their dragon stones. Or right now, people are not trusting of getting vaccinated. People just generally don't have trust. We don't trust our governments, and sometimes rightfully so, to not be just like sharing our resources broadly. Like for instance, with the vaccine, countries are not sharing the vaccines like equally. Like wealthy countries are hoarding vaccines and not letting countries such as of the global south really stake a claim in getting vaccines, and they're not like willing to share that. So like for instance, what I was kind of mentioning, like 90% of all the vaccine doses have already been purchased by like really wealthy countries, especially like if you even think about now, Joe Biden just promised that all Americans should be able to get vaccinated by the 4th of July. If that's the case, obviously there's going to be less wealthy countries. That means that they cannot get vaccinated if we're all getting vaccinated by that point in time. We also just generally have an issue of not trusting vaccines or technologies that are coming out of non-Western countries, like specifically like China and Russia are developing their own vaccines, which could in theory be really helpful to less wealthy countries, because like in the West, like with big pharma, these companies are not willing to share their intellectual property or technology and to share those resources with people. So kind of all this is to say, like right now, we are currently kind of facing the same problems that they were facing in Raya, because we are not willing to share our resources or share our dragon stones to like benefit the common good of everybody. And I just really got like stuck on this whole idea in watching the movie. And it's like not necessarily subtle either. Like they talk about how in Fang, for instance, where Namari is from, like they don't have as much food as they do in Heart. So it's not just the dragon stones. They do talk about like other general resources that are affecting people's lives in negative ways, and not being able to share them and not being able to trust people to do the right things with those resources.
Yeah, I suppose you could read all that into the film. I didn't. I just feel like it was kind of shallow. I guess I can now see, I can completely get your point, and I even agree with it, that there's a plague and that people should come together to share their resources. I feel like the whole thing got resolved really quickly, and the whole story just revolved around 2 people who just needed to trust each other. And even then, I was really struck by this random IMDb review that I read, where they were like, awful message. I could not get behind it. The idea that you can trust someone after they betrayed you multiple times in a row, just blindly. And that really stuck with me. Like, why did Raya decide to trust Namari after being backstabbed, like, literally, like, 3 times? Like, literally. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I did not get that completely.
I think the other reason why I was making this connection was because, and this is the thing that I feel like maybe they added in, to like tie to the current times, was how they really emphasized like all of the characters had people that they lost due to this plague. Like all of the people that, because that was also part of the story, like she basically had to assemble a team in order to defeat this plague, and all of the people on her team were all like either like orphans or people that had lost their like entire families to the plague. And that, I think, is something that is probably like incredibly relatable, well, I know is incredibly relatable to a large audience of this movie. And I think to frame that for kids maybe who would be watching this movie who have maybe lost family members to COVID was interesting. And I think that they handled that aspect of the movie pretty well.
But is it tone deaf that everyone was able to live happily ever after and get everyone back and kind of feel like they benefited from it?
Yeah, I didn't love that. Because that to me just felt like, okay, well, I just felt like they just did that because it's a Disney movie and they want to have a happy ending. But it definitely is like not real.
It just had a bit of a perfect ending for me, to a way that did not land. And it was very like, the movie for me was very flat. I couldn't read too deeply into it. I wanted to read deeply into it. And I just didn't get a lot. Like, I watch movies like Soul. I watch movies like Moana, like Wolfwalkers, like a lot of kids media. And there's debates to be had there. With this one, like, yeah, your point is probably right. They probably did mean to draw some parallels between the pandemic and us. And I just don't think there's much wiggle room for argument or interpretation in this movie.
Yeah, like I said before, I definitely think I'm stretching at making some of these comparisons.
So we can move on. I want to know about all your thoughts about Raya and whether you really thought about the pandemic parallel, like Savannah did, or maybe not like I did. But we can kind of move on to the theater experience, or the at-home theater experience. I love the movies. I love being able to sit down and immerse myself in the big screen, have that surround sound, and most of all, not be able to press pause. Being able to press pause seriously takes you out of it. It really does ruin that fantasy of being at the movies and being immersed in the story. And we also had to pay $30 to be able to watch it at home on the little screen, which I know. This is the second Premiere Access I paid for. The first one was for Trolls 2 World Tour, and that was only $20. This like extra $10 to make it $30 felt like a little too much.
Yeah, $30 is a lot of money. I definitely think that going to the movies might be like the thing I miss the most since the pandemic has started. I really love going to the movies just like you, Ryan, and I miss it a lot. I feel the same way, like just being able to pause or have people like going in and out of like maybe the room you're in, or not having that like general law that you can't talk during the movie, like just at a movie theater, like all those things kind of just like really take you out of it. I did wonder though, especially with this movie and like really noting how good the animation was, I wonder if I had like a better viewing experience of really seeing all those details by being able to watch it on like my 4K TV, which I don't know technically if it was even like streaming in 4K, but I'm sure that I was able to like see more details on the TV versus like at the movie theater where it's like a projection of it. I did wonder if that maybe could be one benefit of watching it at home.
I don't know. What was your watching experience like? Who did you watch it with, or did you watch it by yourself?
I watched it by myself.
Oh.
Well, actually, okay. Well, first I started watching it with my boyfriend, but then he was making snarky comments, so I made him leave. And then I was just watching it with Stevie, my dog. So I was by myself, and I watched it in the middle of the day. A problem I did have with watching it at home on my TV was that it was the middle of the day, so there was some like glare issues with the TV. But yeah, that was my viewing experience.
So I live with my family, and I have the privilege of living with my family during this time, so I do get to see them on the regular. And we were going to watch it on Tuesday, but then everyone's schedules didn't line up, so we ended up watching it on Wednesday evening. That's like 3 days before filming. And so it was a little tough in the beginning because, you know, we sit down, we press play, the intro starts. Okay, we got to pause. Someone changed their mind. They want ice cream. Okay, we press play. Oh, wait, I want ice cream too. Restart. Press play. It's really hard and rough in the beginning. And my mom was like weirdly struck by the humor in this film, so she laughed a lot. I don't know why. It really tickled.
I wish I could have been there for that. Because it takes a lot to make your mom laugh sometimes.
It can, yeah. But my mom really enjoyed this film. She said she was pleasantly surprised. And I do think that if I I don't know. One of my brothers said it was his least favorite Disney movie of all time. Another one said 10 out of 10, and the other one didn't give me a rating. So it was very fun to kind of talk about with everyone kind of in the same circular living room space after the movie was done, and not have to wait until we're like out walking through the movie theater, and like go in separate cars or whatever. So that was kind of nice. But other than that, it was a little rough of a viewing experience. I was also taking notes while I was watching, so I might have missed some things, but I also watched it twice.
I wonder if having movies be like straight to streaming might make movies like more accessible to more people, because albeit like it did cost $30 and you have to have a Disney Plus subscription, but I was just thinking like if somebody has like a large family or an extended family and they want all their kids to be able to see the new movie, that's still probably cheaper than having to pay for like each individual movie ticket and to go to the movies. So for that, I think that's pretty cool, but I mean there is like several walls you have to get to in order to be able to watch the movie. I don't know, do you feel like movies being like straight to streaming might make them more accessible, Ryan?
I do, and I think it's one of the things that might change in the future, one of the things past the pandemic that might never be the same. I know HBO Max has been doing a lot of simultaneous premieres as well, like with Wonder Woman and Judas and the Black Messiah.
And Tom and Jerry.
And Tom and Jerry. So I think dual premieres will continue potentially onward. HBO Max hasn't made you pay for additional content, albeit the streaming service is like $15.99, which is a little bit pricey. And
they don't like stay there forever. Like I remember I missed out on watching Wonder Woman because I didn't watch it. It was only there for like a few weeks.
So I think that could maybe become the standard, is kind of doing a dual release, or maybe like it releases in theaters first and then comes to streaming for a little while, which I personally like. Like I said, I watched Trolls World Tour in their premiere, and that just stayed up. I don't think they ever really took that down, which I appreciated. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about watching movies in the home. Well, final thoughts. Savannah, I feel like I didn't really get like your full opinion of to whether you like this movie, would watch it again, like if you were to have children, would want them to watch it. Like I don't get that vibe. I didn't get that from you.
Yeah, no, I did like it. If I had kids, I would let them watch it. I feel like it was kind of like in the middle. Like I didn't feel like there was anything necessarily to hate about it or anything to be like obsessed with about it. Like I remember when I saw Moana, even as an adult, I was like, I love this. Like this is a movie for me. I didn't have like that kind of reaction to it. I wouldn't be mad if I was working with kids and they wanted me to like watch this movie and over again with them. I wouldn't be mad about that. But it was just kind of like, okay, I probably won't watch it again. But it was enjoyable enough. I feel like it shows maybe like a trajectory of movies getting better with their like representation and characters, but still not perfect. But I think it shows that maybe we're on the right path with it a little bit.
Some final thoughts that I have. I don't want to be CinemaSins or anything, but like the dad, when the Druun was coming, he just picked up Raya and threw her over the bridge, and he could have just easily picked her up and like jumped off with her. You know, it's like one of those things where it's like it all could have been easily avoided. And then
I didn't even realize that, but you're right. Why did that happen? Oh, but he was hurt, remember? He got shot in the leg.
He did get shot in the leg. I still feel like he could have jumped in the water. I 100% feel like he was about to be turned into stone. Wouldn't you jump off a bridge? That could have prevented that with your daughter. Like, come on.
Yeah.
2, I hated Boss Baby. I hated her. Why was she there? Oh. Loved Shrimp Boy, hated Boss Baby.
At first, I thought we were talking about the movie Boss Baby, and I was going to be kind of upset because I liked the movie Boss Baby. Yeah, I could have done without Boss Baby and her monkeys.
Yeah, Shrimp Boy, great. Not estranged father, but the other companion, I don't know. There were a lot of characters that I feel like they wanted us to care about near the end there, but I wasn't super sold on most of them. I was also waiting for... Shrimp Boy was like reminiscing about his family, and he was talking about his sisters and how one of them always tousles his hair, and he said this twice. He talked about his tousling of the hair twice, and he went to go see his family. No hair tousle. No.
Yeah, I did kind of feel like the movie was close to 2 hours, and I kind of felt at the end like, what happened in those 2 hours? There wasn't a lot of necessarily development of the backstory or development of all the different characters, or even necessarily like a lot of action. So I'm not exactly sure what happened all during that time. It was a little strange with that for me.
Okay, well anyways, wrapping up here, I'm your Primo, Ryan.
And I'm your Prima, Savanah.
Wrapping up here another episode. Please leave a comment. Tell us your thoughts. Subscribe to us on our multiple platforms, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. And we have to talk about our special giveaway. Are you ready, Savannah?
Yes, I am ready.
Savannah, tell us, how do you enter?
All right, so to enter, and first I just want to say this is not your normal giveaway. This is a special giveaway because you're not competing against a bunch of other people. Really, just if you participate in this, you will get something from this giveaway. So, pretty exciting. So, all you have to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram. Take a screenshot of all three of those things and either email us your screenshots with your mailing address or DM us on Instagram with your screenshots and your mailing address. And if you're not an Instagram person, you're just a podcast or YouTube person, you don't even have to do the Instagram part. Just send us your review and that you're subscribed, your screenshots to our email address, and you will get one of these lovely items from Ryan.
From me, from your Prima, Ryan. I will look at your whatever social media you're on, whether it's your username, your Instagram account, whatever. And I do have a certain divinity when looking at yourself and your being. I have pretty good intuition of telling what kind of aura you are. And I will especially select a Pokemon card that I feel is representative of your aura. Whether that's Fat Pikachu, Skinny Pikachu, Piplup, a rare Xerneas, you name it. It could be you.
All right, so take a look. We will also have all this information in our description box, and you can find it on our social media as well. So take a look at that if you are interested. We also just want to give a quick thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. We really appreciate all of you. If you're interested in helping keeping this podcast going, feel free to check out our Patreon. We got some cool content on there that is very extra special just for our patrons. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.